Hey, I'm Mark Norman.
What's up, Felipe Esparza.
This is Will Sylvester.
I am comedian Jared Freed.
Hi, is comedian Shantae Wayans.
Oh, this is Lazo Lagola.
And you're tuning in to Come My Mouth Podcast.
Tune into the Comedy Mouth Podcast, homie.
And you are now tuning in to the Comedy Mouth Podcast.
And you are tuning into Comedy in Your Mouth Podcast. Why you don't listen to Comedy in Your Mouth?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Comedy Mouth. I've got an amazing guest here today. You could catch his special on Netflix, Tennessee Kid. He's got an amazing new podcast called Nate Land. It is Olivia himself. Nate, how's it going, man?
I'm good, thank you. This is the real Olivia.
It's the real Olivia. Do you get that, like, where fans are coming up to you and they're going like, "What's up, Olivia?" Like, kind of like shouting to you across the street?
Yeah, it does happen. I've had people shout out Olivia, and you know, it takes a minute. I don't. It's not so much that I'm just like answering to it now. It's still a little. It takes a second to register, but it does happen quite a bit.
You see, like, I compare it to the whole thing of like with Jim Gaffigan and Hot Pockets when he like first started off doing that joke, and then like people would go like Hot Pockets, and then he would like respond to that.
Yeah.
But does it ever get like irritating, or is it just like, yes, like I've got this fan base that like now knows me as Olivia?
It's no, it's very nice, and it's you know, I mean, look, you know, when you start comedy, your whole goal is to eventually have people know you for like that Hot Pockets or something. So it's very cool, and like, you know, sometimes they can say it to you a few times. I get also Nathan, Nathanael, people will they try to make that joke with you, and you know, if they do it like once, you're like, oh, that's awesome. It's like if they keep doing it, you're like, all right, dude, that's
now it's enough. Now it's enough.
Now it's enough. Yeah.
How are you holding up during the pandemic? Have you been writing? Have you been doing any of like these Zoom shows?
I haven't done any Zoom shows. I've you know, I got a couple ideas. It's hard to, you can't try any jokes out, you know. So you don't really know this stuff you come up with, is it going to be good or not? So I definitely have some stuff. I've done some shows. They've opened. We've had a couple comedy clubs that have opened, like with social distancing and all that kind of stuff, and half rooms. So I was able to do. I think I've done a few of them, but not many. And it's been just like a weekend where it's like you get to do it one weekend, and you don't do it for 2 months. So I was able to try some of the stuff, but you know, it's, you know, trying to stay active. That's what starting the podcast was this was a big thing that sent it forward, because it was just trying to be, you know, being funny is a muscle, and you really do got to work it, and you can lose it if you don't. And I mean, this is such a long time without doing stand up. So we needed to, you know, get on it.
You're right. Like the whole thing really is, it's like a craft. So, I mean, do you feel like, you know, with the whole podcast and everything, that it's almost like complementing your stand-up comedy, or it's kind of allowing you to find like maybe new stories to tell?
Yeah, yes, it definitely does that. You know, so some of the best writing I think you come up as comics is hanging out. Like when you're hanging out talking to friends, because you get a story, like someone says something and you're like, oh, dude, one time I remember this guy, you know, and then that just gets you into the story. So a lot of stories that I've had, either they happened to me at that moment, or some of them, if I talk about old stories, it's stories that are brought up and I'm like, yeah, that reminded me of this story, you know. And so that's a huge thing, because it makes your brain kind of think different, and then you're kind of going off other people. And I just think it keeps you kind of sharp and makes you always kind of continue to think like that.
Absolutely. And especially like with comedy being such an individualistic type of profession, you need to be like around that round table type of environment where you could like get your friends to, I don't know, maybe like tweak your material, or maybe just see what you could find. And especially speaking to a lot of like the seller comics, not having that back table right now, I think has been a little bit difficult. Have you found like almost your creativity process has been like stunted during this process?
Yeah, I mean, you know, coming up with stuff. I mean, like I said, I don't think I've come up with too much stuff, and normally I would be on the road right now. And so, you know, I was in New York where I started, and but now like you start doing hour-long sets, and you just can really write a lot on the road. So that's hurt it, because I would be throwing stuff in. You know, I was hoping to tape another special, and that would have gotten so much tighter. And I would have added to it, and it would just been felt really good. And it's the stop and go. It's instead of, usually you'd be getting to do it and then you keep doing it and every night it's going to get better. And it's like now you do it one night, you get lucky and you have one night you can do a show, and then you can have a show for 3 months or, 7 months or whatever this is going to end up being.
But I mean, obviously, if you're looking to film a special now, you must be writing like material at a lightning speed.
No, I kind of already had it. So the way I kind of write is when I am under the gun and I feel I need a special, which is usually, or you need a new hour, is right after you tape a special.
Yeah.
And when I need that, that's when I'm like, I'm in a kind of a search mode, and I'm really looking for material and like trying to figure out and come up with new ideas. Now, before this happened, I kind of had a new hour. I probably needed, probably 10 more minutes to fill in some spots. And I was really working on more tidying it up and making it just hit more. And I don't know, just like getting it in the right places, get some jokes I didn't like out of it, new jokes. So I was luckily kind of built up, where if I wasn't, I think I'd be in big trouble right now. But luckily I was kind of ready, and then this happened. So now I kind of have an hour that I'm sitting on that's new, that no one's heard.
That's so interesting. So do you have or did you have a specific platform that you were looking to kind of release it on? Would you go back to Netflix, or would you do like the whole thing that like Mark Normand and Joe List and everyone is doing like with YouTube?
I've probably done Netflix. So it's, that new way with Joe and Norman and Sam Morril, and they're doing it that way. Those guys are getting a ton of views. I mean, it shows you just how funny those comics are. Those are, you got to get very lucky in this business to like, I got in with Netflix a few years ago, and I got lucky to get in when I got in, and I did the stand-ups, and then they did the special. So then you get in, you're kind of in, and then sometimes it's harder. You don't get in. You don't get in the system because they have too many comics or something. And so then, but I like that Norman and Sam and Joe, and they found another way to get their sets out. And I mean, those guys are all three of the best comics. So it's nice that, people get to see them do an hour, and I think they're going to really shine for that.
Absolutely. And I think just a lot of people are like really like, especially Mark Normand. Like I know, so I'm from South Africa, and I spoke to Mark like a couple of weeks ago, and I said, and also like Will Vince, and Mark was like, he was shocked that he has a fan base like in South Africa. So I mean, that's just kind of like just like blew up like everywhere. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah.
And then when it comes to like Netflix, is Netflix like, do they like tamper with your material or anything, or is it like you film the special and then you approach them with the special already filmed?
No, I would have filmed with so the last one, Netflix filmed it. You submit all your material, but Netflix is pretty good. They kind of leave you alone. I mean, I'm trying to think, I don't think there was anything. I mean, I'm a clean comedian, so I've never had a ton of material that was super, offensive or like crazy. If anything, I ever like Tonight Show, when I do the Tonight Show, I could never say, some of them I couldn't say Starbucks, or I couldn't say McDonald's. I couldn't ever say the names of stuff, especially if I'm telling not an unflattering story towards that business. I mean, McDonald's might sponsor all of Tonight, they have the commercials or whatever it is, Walmart, so some of them, you can say it, but then sometimes they're like, maybe don't say it. I had one of the Tonight Shows, I told the iced coffee with milk joke, and I couldn't say Starbucks. And so I had to say, and it just, some reason it just makes it not as good. But yeah, I had an old Pep Boys joke. I don't know if you know, Pep Boys is like an auto zone. And then I couldn't say Pep Boys. And they're like, you just can't say. And sometimes it's like, that's kind of I kind of need to say it. Like, even though the joke's not about the name, it's just, you want people to put that picture. It paints the picture. And that's when it kind of kills you when you're like, you're not letting me paint this picture of this place and someone can envision being in there. But Netflix is pretty good. Netflix, I mean, you can really do whatever you want. I mean, that's, and that's the way a lot of people are going now, these streaming. I mean, you can say whatever. They don't have ads. So it's not like you can offend anybody. If they like what the person's saying, then you get on.
But it's so crazy to just see how like these streaming platforms like Netflix are just like taking over. And then you look at Comedy Central and their model has just like changed completely, especially over the last year. Like you see that they're just like moving to adult animation as opposed to like, I mean, they just canceled like Tosh.0 and a bunch of these other shows. And
Did they cancel Tosh.0?
they canceled Tosh.0.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
been on
the
for a
only show where it
long
actually
time.
like has people now is The Daily Show. That's about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, they're just going such a different. I mean, it's so crazy. Comedy Central, I don't, they had it like with stand up. I mean, so many people were being known from stand up on there. And they have all those stand up specials of just everybody that's working comics right now. And they're just sitting all of it. And it's like, how are you not like taking stand up comedy is in a really good place right now. People love stand up comedy. You know, the Sirius XM radios, everybody's listening to it, Spotify, Pandora, all this stuff. People listen to albums more than they ever have. And they were just sitting on all that stuff. How do you not take advantage of that? And just, I mean, they could just air it. They could air stand up over and over again. I think people would watch, if you just showed specials all day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I think like, I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think that we really are in the golden age of stand-up comedy.
Yes, I do agree. I mean, with COVID hurt us, but I do think it was, yeah, it's so much easier to see specials. People are more aware of stand-up than they ever have. I remember first starting and people would say, they'd be like, oh, I've never been to a stand-up show. I don't know. I've never even thought about stand-up comedy. They just wouldn't think about it. And now it's very much around. Everybody thinks about it. Everybody watches it more than they ever have. And people are looking at it, as a way like music, where they go find their new band they like, and people are doing that with comedy. Yeah, I agree. I think comedy's the best place it's ever been.
And it's so crazy to think like kind of on that note that like their first stand-up comedy show that they've ever watched is going to be like a Zoom show. And then they're going to go to the club and they're going to be like, holy shit, this is so different.
This is unbelievable. It's so different. Yeah, I mean, they're talking about doing those shows too, where it's like, I think it's a bunch of screens and then everybody can sit and watch. And I mean, all that stuff it's weird. I can't tell. Some of it's like, all right, do you want to do it? Look, if I felt like we're not doing live shows for 5 years, be extreme, then you're like, all right, let me go figure out a new system. But hopefully it won't be that. Hopefully it'll be at least next year we're starting, and then we can get back into the rhythm of things. And because otherwise it's like, either do you just wait it out, or do you, because that's the thing, you build a new hour. Like I built a new hour. How do I want this hour to be presented? Do I want it in front of a real audience, half audience? It's like you want to kind of give it its best shot that it deserves. So it's, you got to fill things out. I mean, right now I think I'm trying to kind of wait, but you never know. I mean, it could all change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you can see, especially with these outside shows, like what Chappelle is doing in Ohio. And I think that people are really just kind of embracing what we have right now. And it seems to be working to an extent.
Yeah. I mean, people adapt very well, and they're figuring out new systems. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be nice. I think comedy clubs will open up before theaters will, because they'll be like a restaurant. And so, so hopefully it would be cool. You're probably going to see a lot of big comics do some small clubs just because they're going to want to get up and they're going to want to perform. So you could see some comics in some pretty unique situations where you can go watch, you probably go watch Chappelle with 20 people because that's all that's going to be allowed in a comedy, so you might get some really neat experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like you might have gotten like a little bit of like rusty over the period?
Yeah, I mean, when I would go do these shows, I mean, yeah, you definitely feel, you worry about just missing some of the little things. There could be little lines here and there, and there's little stuff that kind of help kind of paint the picture, as we talked about. And so you worry about missing some of those stuff. I mean, I've done this for 17 years, so I've done it constantly for 17 years. It's like I've never stopped. So this break is definitely by far the longest break I've ever taken in comedy. So you definitely do feel you would be a little rusty. That when I first did some of these shows, my voice would get a little tired when I talked for an hour. Wow. And I've never had that because I think my voice is just used to talking straight for an hour, 5-6 times a week. And I just noticed like you start being like, oh, my voice is getting kind of tired. And so it's like that kind of thing, that like tour shape that you kind of are in, just with your voice and just being up late and like, you know, it's like, you know, I mean, you're not going to bed till 2 a.m. and all that kind of stuff. That will be the interesting part once we can get back out, just to get back into that rhythm. And like doing like the 5 sets a night, sort of like a thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in New York anymore, but I did it. The most I ever did was 7. But when I go to New York, I'll do like 5 a night. I mean, it's you know, yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's when you get really good. You make a lot of you get your act. You get try it 5 different times, but some of those when I did 7, dude, it all kind of blends in together. I mean, you get to like 4, 5, 6, or maybe 5, 6, 7. You start like you're like, did I already say this joke? And you're like, you run a risk of repeating the same joke because you can't remember. You just done all these sets kind of blend in, and then you're just kind of like, I don't even remember what I've said where, you know. But you do get jokes really. You get them. I always say New York is like learning comedy, and it's dog years because you go up so much, and so if you're anywhere else, you can't go on stage that much. But in New York, I mean, I went on 5 times on, you know, you go up 20 times on a weekend. That's like in most places, if you go up 20 times in a month, that's amazing. And so in New York, if you can go up 20 times in a weekend, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's crazy. And I mean, I could speak from like the South African perspective. Like we've got like 3 comedy clubs like in South Africa, and you know, we don't necessarily have like 5 shows like in one night. So you're not going to see like the comedians bounce from one club to another. It's like that one set show, and it only takes place on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then that's it. So I think that the growth period in South Africa also takes like a lot longer. So you guys are blessed in the States to have so many comedy clubs where you guys could just like work on your art form just so quickly. And you guys could just rise up the ranks so quickly. Yeah. What do y'all do? Is it a headliner or is it just like 6 comics on a show? No, it's like 6 comics on a show. And also the scene is so small. Like that's the thing. How much time do y'all do? It's maybe like 5 minutes, maybe around that. Yeah. 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. 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 That stuff's good. When you're first starting, and you're learning, it's really good to do those shorter sets. But then as you go longer, you need to start. Then you get to points where you got to start going out on the road and like doing an hour, and it really becomes it becomes a different thing. And how I write jokes, and my jokes used to be a lot shorter, and now they're just much longer, and because you're just talking for an hour and 15 minutes on stage. So you become a whole show instead of being on a show with other people. But yeah, that's how we started. It was like those 6 shows you do in 10 minutes, and then you pop on and pop off, and yeah. But that's tough if you only have. Can you go to different clubs each, or is it kind of like you're at this club for this weekend? So there's like literally like 3 clubs in South Africa. So like 3 like I would say like main clubs. So there's one called like Goliath and Goliath, another one up the road called Parker's, and then another one called Cape Town Comedy Club. When like the guys like Trevor Noah and like that generation was starting, there wasn't even like proper comedy clubs in the country. Like they were just going to like these like bars and things like that and like performing to crowds of like 10 people. Yeah. When you first start New York, I performed for one guy once in New York at Boston Comedy Club. It was brutal, dude. I tried to. Oh, it was the worst. I told him, I was like, I don't want to do this. I tell that story in my act now just because it's such a. But I mean, when you first started, it was like 2, 4. I mean, if you had 6 people, you were like, "This is a big show. This is 6 people. This is a big deal." Yeah, it's very interesting. Trevor, I remember. The first time I met Trevor was at Dublin, in Ireland, a comedy festival there. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's in Dublin. Awesome festival, fun time. And I met Trevor that week. It was not too much longer. He got the Daily Show after that, but we hung out that whole weekend. Because it was always interesting to me, too. Trevor was so big in South Africa And then like when you meet him here, or even like in other countries, then they come to America. Ricky Gervais the same way. Ricky Gervais was, you know, in the UK, he was this enormous comic. And then I remember Ricky came into, this was right when I started comedy around 2000. I started in 03, so this was when I was in New York. I moved to New York in 04. And so it was 04, 05. And I remember Ricky Gervais came into Boston Comedy Club, and most comedians didn't know who he was. And I was like, dude, he's a comedian. And, you know, the British Office, I think was on. And I was like, dude, he's a comic. He's like pretty famous in the UK. And he just came in by himself. No one bothered him. And, you know, and he just came and kind of watched a little bit, then he left. And I just remember I was like, that's crazy, dude. Like, that guy's huge. And knowing this, now he's obviously both of them, Trevor and Ricky, are super famous. But it was interesting to see they come over here and they're, you know, not, you could go somewhere and you're like, yeah, no one knows who you are. You know, you could be big in your world, but then not big in another.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so strange to see because he was so big in South Africa. He was really big in Australia just because there's a huge South African population in Australia.
Yeah.
And then he was huge in the UK. But then when he came to America, just nobody knew who he was. But now, I mean, he's a superstar. I know a couple of Trevor's friends like in South Africa. And yeah, I mean, like they say that he's just still like the same like regular guy. But obviously he's just got a lot more fame now.
Yeah, he was always very nice because when I met him in Ireland, I mean, I knew he was enormous. But we hung out, we got along very well. And then when after he got Daily Show, and then I saw him, you know, I'd see him at some festivals here and there. And as always was just like, what's up, man? How are you? You know, like very nice and generous, like, you know, really cared and like, dude, I see you're doing great. Like, that's awesome. You know, like a guy, because he's like someone that, you know, after he got a Daily Show, became huge. You're like, he could have came up to me and been like, "Oh, what's your name again?" You know, but he wasn't like that. He was, he's an awesome dude.
Absolutely.
And those are the guys that you're glad they get where they get because you need good people like that.
Absolutely. I don't know him personally, but I know he's one very good friend, Eugene. So I've had Eugene a couple of times, like on this podcast and things like that. He's also a very cool guy. They came up at the same time. And they came up in South Africa when there was like almost no scene. So it's great, especially like during the new democracy in South Africa after apartheid. Yeah. So I mean that was very interesting to see. Actually, kind of like taking it back, you know, when you were starting off in Tennessee, was there a big comedy scene then?
Well, so I moved to Chicago first, and so when I moved to Chicago, I never did it in Tennessee. Chicago was the first place I ever did comedy. And when I started there, it was like Pete Holmes, Hannibal Buress, Kumail Nanjiani, T.J. Miller. There's a lot of comics. We were all starting off together. And then from there, I moved to New York. I moved right after Pete Holmes and his HBO show Crashing.
Yeah,
I did exactly that. I did that with Pete.
That is
so
crazy.
Pete started Barking at Boston Comedy Club, and then I moved maybe 6 months after he did to New York, and then Pete got me Barking at Boston Comedy Club. And so we would be standing on those corners and being like, hey, we got a great comedy, trying to get people to come into the club. And our buddy Dustin Jafin ran it, and it was an amazing, you know, I loved it. I mean, I loved, you know, Chappelle used to come in there. I used to watch Chappelle go up in front of like 6 people because he would be taping the Chappelle show. And then he would come do a set like after he got done taping. And so we'd come watch him. Like he would just pop in and we would go outside and just be like, Chappelle's on stage, and people could go in for free. And I mean, it would just fill up because I mean, 100 people, anybody you said that to was like, all right, I'll go watch Chappelle for free. And they'd come in. I remember one person didn't, and it was weird. One person, I go, Dave Chappelle's on stage. You can go watch him for free. And they were like, I don't believe you. And there was like 3 steps to the door. And I was like, well, just go look in the window. If Dave Chappelle's not on the stage, then turn around and leave. And they were like, no. Like we were tricking them or something. And they left. And I always think about those people. Because clearly they wanted to. It wasn't like they were like, I don't like comedy. They just didn't. They thought we were lying. And then they just left. And I always think about them because I'm always like, they could have watched Chappelle in front of 10 people, which is a pretty unique experience to get to watch him just talk to the crowd. You know, I mean, sometimes he would have makeup on from the Chappelle show.
Yeah.
It was an awesome time to be in New York.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But you know what I think it probably was? It was probably like tourists like myself who see, you know, like those guys in Times Square that hold up like those things and say, Comedy Central, come and see the show. Like it's probably just like that. And then you pop up and it's just like, you know, a bunch of open markers.
Yes, that's what they thought. But that's what was so funny. That's why I kept going, just go look in that window. He was on stage. I was like, if he's not on that stage, then turn around and come back. And they were like, no. They still weren't, and I was like, all right, but yes, and I've handed out flyers in Times Square before, where you were that guy. That used to be how you would get stage time, is you would do that stuff, and then you would get 5 minutes of stage time at the end of the night, and so you kind of worked for the club all day just to go up at 1 a.m. for 5 minutes, and you would just do it every night, and but the big part of that was I got to watch I watched Bill Burr and Patrice O'Neal, and I watched all these comics that were, you know, they weren't who they were now. Chappelle was huge, but the other ones weren't. They were probably 10-year comics, and getting to really see them come into their own. I mean, you know, Aziz Ansari, I remember him coming in, he got passed at the Comedy Cellar. So he's able to start playing there, and he was like at open mics with us, and then he got into the Comedy Cellar, then he was on that Human Giant show, then he was hosting the MTV Movie Awards. It was just such a crazy kind of like thing to get to see. Amy Schumer, friends with Amy, and I was around her a lot, and Amy it was very fun to see these people become famous and see them actually become huge stars, because you could see that there was a path to it. You know, the hard part sometimes is if you're, you know, you guys have like Trevor Noah, like that's a big deal to know that Trevor Noah came from where y'all came from and is doing what y'all do. You know that there is a path to a wild success. And the hard part sometimes is when people are in smaller places, it seems impossible. Like, because you're like, no one comes from here. And so you need to be able to see that sometimes, where you can, you know, see someone make it. And then that helps you kind of keep going at it. And, you know, you start going like, all right, I see what he did and what you need to do. And you keep kind of grinding.
Absolutely. And you know, like really to kind of to that point, you know, like I see a comic like you, as I call them, like the MSG type comics, where it's like you're on the cusp of, I mean, like I'm not like some oracle of the future, but I'm just saying that I see you as one of those comics that are soon going to go out and like sell out like MSG. So obviously with your gradual like sort of move towards stardom, because you're famous now. So, I mean, do you kind of like see yourself in that light? Like, do you kind of also see yourself like on that sort of a journey, how you viewed Aziz Ansari and Amy Schumer and all these other people?
You know, I mean, I want to be on that path. And, you know, I can definitely see it's taken a long time. It's been doing it 17 years. It's just being around, and I've had success the whole time. Nothing has been really this huge thing that I just leaped forward a ton. The Netflix special was probably the biggest thing I ever did, where the most number of people saw me, and then you kind of moved forward from there. We started doing theaters right before, you know, I've been doing about a year of theaters. And so when you're doing some bigger places and you're able to sell some of these out in all these cities, you can definitely tell that it's way different than it was. And now you're just trying to keep it, and still, I mean, I still have a long way to go, but it's interesting. You know, I mean, look, you get recognized a little bit more. It's not crazy. It's not a big problem, but you get recognized. You're seeing little signs where people know who you are and that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. And, you know, just how long it takes to get to this point, and you just got to keep kind of grinding it out. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, yes, I would love, you know, my goal is want to play MSG and be able to, you know, especially New York is such a big, I always look at myself as a New York comic because I was there for almost 9 years. And so to go do something like that would be enormous. And yeah, and hopefully, you know, hopefully it happens. I mean, we'll see, but hopefully get over there to South Africa. I've never really done any of that stuff, just Ireland and that kind of thing. But when you get tour, like you look at Gaffigan, I mean, that guy, how many tickets that guy sells and where he sells tickets is remarkable. It's,
he's been here before.
Yeah, he's enormous. And, which I feel like South Africa is, I mean, y'all are kind of mainstream of a place to, South Africa's a place that you really go to. And then, but I mean, he sold theaters out in Russia. It's like places where you're like, you don't expect. I definitely don't think, in my head, I'm not like, one day I'm going to go to Russia and sell out a bunch of tickets, I mean, I would love to, but there's no way you're thinking that that's going to be a thing,
But kind of looking at it from the beginning, like, did you have that sort of an ambition where you kind of like looked forward and you went, oh, in 10 years, I want to be that comic who is constantly performing at the Cellar and is just selling out like to these just like thousands of people, like what you're doing now? Or was it like, I'm just going to take this journey kind of as it comes?
You take it, I mean, in general, like I was a big Seinfeld fan. And so like you want to be like Seinfeld. So you do want to get to these points and sell these places out and become a huge comedian. And I look at like you want to be known as one of the top comics. And when people talk, and comedy is so subjective, so it's hard to really be like, this guy's the best or this guy's the best. But you want to be, when people talk about the best, you want to be able to hopefully be in that conversation. So you do think that when you're first starting, but at the beginning, I always gave myself little goals. So like when I barked and when I would hand out flyers on the corner in New York, I just didn't want to do that anymore. Like I knew like, all right, I don't want to be handing these flyers out. I'm outside, it's 10 degrees out and I'm handing flyers. So I would always have these little goals of just, how do I get off this corner? How do I stop doing this? And now I'm just going to do shows without like having to work to get on stage. And so I would always have little tiny goals instead of just some big goal. Because it was like, that was to be on Madison Square Garden. When you first start, you're like, I don't know how to, it's like so far away. I have 10 minutes of material. But if you can have little goals that you can that you can accomplish and can accomplish a lot quicker than, being Madison Square Garden, because you never know how long your career is going to take. I mean, we're in a business that it could never happen. It could happen. I always say you either make it at 20 or 40. Like no one seems to make it in the middle. You either get to come out the gate and you're Pete Davidson and you get some stuff and you're a great comic, and then you get to be a megastar super young, or you go the Bill Burr route and you're 40 and then you make it. And so it's either, those are the two routes. And it looks like the 20-year-old route is over. So probably over the 40-year-old route is the one I'll be going to. But yeah, I hope to one day, now I want to sell that stuff out and I want to be able to do that stuff. And that's definitely kind of the goals I have now.
But I think it's like, that's a given. It's just really, it just comes down to like when at this point.
If I don't make it, I'm coming back here to be like, hey, remember when you told me I was going to play Madison Square Garden? I'm going to have to go.
I'll take the blame, and then I could become your agent in South Africa. So I'll tell you around in South Africa.
Thank you.
So obviously, like, what was the thing that like kept you going? What was that love for comedy? Where did it kind of like root from? Because, you get a lot of people that are like, I'm a good storyteller. I'm very funny around my friends at a barbecue. But like, what was that like sort of a knack that made you go, holy shit, I should go try this on stage now. And let me keep at it, even through all the bombs and everything.
Yeah, it was growing up. I always thought, I was always told that I was funny. You'd always make people laugh. And so that's the kind of thing that pushes you into it, and where you go like, let me go try this. And then you go try it. And then you just kind of keep going. I was lucky to have some success. I got on TV probably 4 or 5 years in, and I was always able to get a couple things where you get some late night sets, you get this, and you get things where you start going forward that you're like, all right, I'm at least, I think, chosen the thing that I'm supposed to do. And so you kind of keep going at it like that way. And you just kind of keep grinding it out. I mean, you keep, and you're always trying to get better. You're always there's always something else to go do. I always look at like, if I'm ever would ever want to retire, I don't think you ever really retire from stand up, but if you ever take breaks, or if you ever, you got to feel like you're fulfilled. There's got to be nothing else that you're chasing. Like now you say like me chasing Madison Square Garden, I'm still searching and chasing something and still trying to get something. So if you get to a certain point, like that's with Eddie Murphy's and Steve Martin's, but they kind of stopped. I mean, there wasn't really much left for them to do. They were the biggest comics in the world. So they were able to kind of like, all right, I'm going to go do movies and try this other thing. I think you could get out of it like that. But I love stand-up so much. I love the art of it. I love, I've never thought of myself as a storyteller. I never thought I was good at telling stories. And then when I've kind of learned how to tell stories now. I've learned how to, most people when they tell stories in their regular life, the stories are too long. They drag on. And you're like, when I have like, I'll have, a regular person will tell me some story because they'll be like, let me tell you this story and see if it's funny. And it's just like brutal because it's so long. And it's like, because they don't know, like you got to learn how to like cut stuff out. You got to learn there might be stuff that you really like in a story, but it's just no one else is going to like it. And it makes the story too long. And then you got to get rid of it. And so you got to learn to self-edit when you tell stuff. And, that was a big thing New York taught me was how to be funny quickly. You'd go on stage, you have 8 minutes, you got to be funny very quick and you got to be funny the whole time. And now doing longer sets, I learned how to be funnier for a longer time and drag stuff out. And like, it's not like you're trying to have down moments. I'm trying to have laughs throughout the whole show. I never try to be too far away from a laugh, because I never want to put too much pressure on any laugh. And so if you tell a story and say 2 minutes is just people listening, well, that laugh has got to be pretty big when you get to the end of it. It can't be, or it's going to be a letdown. But if you have laughs through that 2 minutes, then the ending, maybe it doesn't need to be that crazy because you kind of had laughs building up to that. So I've always kind of done it I've done it that way. But yeah, I never thought I was just some amazing storyteller. Like Artie Lane or Big J. Okerson. They were guys that could tell stories, and they've always told stories. They were just so naturally gifted. They could remember everything, remember details, and tell amazing stories. But I've learned how to craft a story, and and with the story, you make everything more personal, and personal is good. I think more people relate to stuff when you're talking about you. That's why people are watching you. They're not, Seinfeld was a very observational guy. It wasn't ever really about him. It was about his observations. But it always has to start through the comic. It's got to be, here's my thing through this. And then people can either laugh at you because you're dumb, or they laugh with you because they've done the dumb thing that you've done. And I think that's how you stay relatable. And, and that's how people kind of grab onto you, and then they tend to like it.
Can you ever get like comfortable in the silence, kind of going back to the point where you kind of like tell the stories where it's like almost like building up, but you're getting like laughs along the way?
So that's something that actually I'm working on. I remember Marc Maron, I used to open for him, and I'd always just kind of ask him. Marc Maron's someone that's really good at, I think, being himself. And when you're watching him, you're watching him, and he's the show. And Marc and Maron told me, he's like, you got to be comfortable with silence. And at first I thought he meant that, where it was like, I am comfortable with silence. I'm okay. Like sometimes them listening is as good as them laughing, because it means they're engaged. When you have a room of 2,000 people and everybody's quiet, it's pretty tough to keep people that engaged. And so when that happens, it's a very good thing. But you also got to be comfortable with silence. I'm comfortable with silence if I know the joke is good that's coming out of this silence, because I know that I'm going to get you. So I'm not worried about the audience being quiet at this point. But you got to be comfortable in silence when you're building new stuff, to be like, I don't know if the end of this is going to be good. I'm not completely there yet. That's something that I'm actually working on now, trying to be a lot more comfortable. So then I think you can come up with better stuff when you're on the spot and you're telling something that you're like, I don't know if this ending's that good, but let me try it. And it makes you try stuff more, and trying stuff is a good thing, and so That's what I'm actually kind of trying to do now.
And then kind of also like on that note, do you get ever comfortable, with bombing? Are you like in a position where it's like, because I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time and you're an extremely talented comedian, but do you ever go out onto stage and like you still fear like bombing, or is it just something like, oh, this is something that could happen, not the end of the world, maybe just have to tweak my material?
I fear bombing. I don't want to bomb. And I have no desire to bomb. When you do bomb, when you try something, usually a lot of times it'll happen right when you start, and then your face gets real red, and then you start talking really quick because you're trying to get them back. I don't like bombing. I mean, I've done it countless times. It's part of the gig is you're going to bomb, but I don't like it. I bombed. Remember one time at Boston Comedy Club, first starting. Everybody was doing good. I was watching, and everybody everybody like as far as the new comics, like I was a new comic, so all the other new comics were like murdering on stage, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna kill. I was like so confident, and then I went up and just bombed so hard, and I never wore that shirt again that I wore. I thought the shirt wasn't good. I blamed it on everything else. I had to go walk around. It really like affected me, and so now I don't want to be to that point. And especially and your pressures become different when people now they're coming to see you versus when people don't know you, then it's like kind of fun because you're getting to like prove how funny you are. This person's like, I don't know who this guy is, and then you get to blow them away with comedy. That's so exciting. But when they know you now, the pressure is like you don't want to be like. You don't want the crowd to sit there and like, this guy used to be good. He's not good anymore. So the pressure kind of changes a little bit. It's the same kind of pressure. It's just kind of you're trying to not lose them now. You want to keep them with you forever. But yeah, I mean, I've never wanted to bomb. I would love to be like, I've never bombed. I mean, I don't want to bomb. I mean, I don't think it's good to bomb. I mean, it probably. It teaches you how to deal with it, which is a good thing, but no one should be. There's a lot of comics that bomb a lot, and they almost take a pride in it, and it's not good. I mean, if you're being a real comic, you shouldn't be just bombing constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like kind of to your whole point, one of the craziest things that I remember actually while listening to is Carlin towards the end of his life. He was performing in Vegas and his opening act would crush it like these new comics. And then he would go out onto stage and then he would just bomb towards the end of his career. Like he just didn't give a shit anymore. And he was one of those types of comics that like, they used to be good. So obviously now when you're going onto stage, do you feel like crowds are like, it's a lot easier to kind of make crowds laugh because people know who you are?
You get it up top. So when you walk out, they will laugh very easily. And then, but you go talk to them for an hour and 15 minutes. So it's, you got to get them back. You got to do good or they're not, you can tell. I will sometimes even throw new jokes up top because I know that they're going to give me a little bit more. So I'll get a little more grace with these new jokes. So I'll try to open with new jokes because I'm trying to put those jokes in a safe kind of place where they're like, I can just try them and get a feel to see if they're good. And then I get to go into my tried and true act that all these jokes I've told everywhere. So I've always liked doing that. But yeah, you do when you go out. You want the audience to like picture you. When when you say something, they're like, I can picture you doing that. You're trying to be the audience's friend. Like you want to feel like they're your buddy and like I'll get people that will be like, you remind me of my buddy I grew up with. It's like, well, that's a good thing. You need to be, they're just going to relate to you more. And when they feel like you're their friend, they just can listen to you a little bit easier and they're going to laugh and then you change how you can write jokes. Everything you say starts becoming funny. That was the thing that Louis C.K. said, where they were like, that's something that asked him like after he was like 25 years in. It's like, do you bomb or something? He's like, no, I mean, not really. Like, I mean, because everything he says is funny now. because we know them so much. And that's kind of how every comic is. You watch Chappelle, everything Chappelle says is funny because we know him. And so you like him. And then, so it's like once you get to that point, but then you got to make sure your jokes are still good, because there is a part that you could fall into a false, you're kind of taking advantage of the crowd liking you. And that will, I think, go away if it happens too long. So you still need to be performing with you're trying to prove to these people, I'm still good. I'm still got it. You're going to have a good time. And, you make them happy.
Absolutely. And then obviously when it comes to you, like creating this character on stage, would you say that you are very similar to your persona on stage?
I am. I mean, maybe I've gotten it. Yeah, I would say so. I think I'm this guy that I am. I've never thought of it as a character. I tried to be pretty honest. I mean, it's all comes from an original thought. Maybe I wouldn't be as dumb in some situations as you make on this, as the stuff that you claim on stage. But in no way is it a character. It all comes from a real thought. And so anything that could be super dumb, it comes from me thinking that. It's never, what would this dumb guy think? I've thought it. And then maybe I drag it out and make it sound worse than it might be. But I think I am what you're getting. That's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. And one of the most fascinating things about you is that you are a clean comic, but you've also got like a lot of like dark humor and everything. You've surrounded yourself with people like Marc Norman, Joe List, and all these comics who aren't necessarily clean. How do you manage to stay like in this thought process where you're almost like consistent and you are clean and you don't let like any of those other comics almost like influence that, if you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah. It was like when I was in New York, I started clean, and I used to do midnight shows that were edgy, uncensored, and I would be the clean guy. But I was never brought up on stage as this guy's clean. My ultimate goal was I was hoping you wouldn't realize I was clean. And so every time I performed, it was I just didn't want you to, because if I would have came out and said this guy's clean, then you got in your mindset, you're thinking, oh, it's like a Christian comic or something. And so I was never trying to do that kind of thing. I was trying to I'll just be clean. This is what I think. And the good thing about it that's been for me is it keeps you away from, I think, talking a lot about stuff that people are talking about. Because I don't talk about sex, and, I'm not dirty. So it's a lot, you have to think of a lot of different words to use. And so that rhythm and everything, I think, just makes it sends you down a path that I feel like you're just not touching ground. Not to say I don't have jokes that are similar to other people. I do. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of keeps you talking about stuff that's different than most people. And that's what I wanted to do. I don't want to talk about something that everybody's talking about unless I feel like I need, I remember reading a book about Jay Leno, or they're talking about comedy, and they were talking about, everybody had this McDonald's joke. And then someone was like, well, but did you hear Jay Leno's McDonald's joke? And like, it's being like his joke was the best. So I look at like that. If you're going to have jokes that are going to be that are about something everybody, then that joke needs to be unbelievable. Otherwise, you're just in the mix of everybody talking about the same thing. But when you go watch shows, I mean, when you see 5 comics on a show, I mean, if they're all dirty, I mean, a lot of times it's the same topic. Like they're all talking about the same kind of thing. And so it was nice to, if you don't talk about those things, then you stand out to the audience a little bit more. And I don't know, it's worked for me, and it's how I've started. And so it's just how I think now. And I've trained myself into kind of like, that's all I don't think about this sex kind of stuff. Not to say I would never not do it, or if I had a joke that worked out that I could do it, but it just makes you kind of stand out and sound different, I think.
But one of the most beautiful things about your comedy is that your stuff is timeless. Like I've seen Tennessee Kid now twice, and like with a long period kind of in between. And the thing is, I think like 20 years down the line, you'll still find that your comedy is relevant, because the thing is, you're not touching really like the political side of things. It's just relatable, and it's like, and it sticks out. Like really, like your comedy special was one of the best of like last year. Like it really was. And I mean, it was timeless. So was that something that you were aiming for?
Yeah. I mean, that's what you don't want to. I never wanted to be in this timetable that you're, I mean, if you watch, like, talk about Carlin, and if you go watch some of his stuff, it could be so, some of it, I mean, what's funny is some of his oldest stuff is the most timeless stuff. This stuff he's talking about, the Weatherman, or like, like Carlin stuff that's timeless is the stuff that's way at the beginning. And then if you get into the topical kind of thing, which a lot of comics do, and they're great at it, but I mean, then your material is always kind of changing. I would rather have a joke be able to stand the test of time, that if you hear it, like you said, if you listen to it in 20 years, it's not being like, man, that feels like that joke was 2019, and it's not going to stick out in some weird way. And I think that way your joke works for a lot of people. I have a lot of different age groups come to my shows. You have grandparents you could have a 12-year-old at the show, and just to see, families together and be able to laugh and it's not uncomfortable. I love that stuff. I love seeing seeing families get together, and people send me videos. Like, I always showed my parents your stand up, and they're showing the parents laugh. It's like, there's not too much stuff anymore that families, parents to grandparents to children, that they can watch. And so I like trying to do that and give something that you can, if your grandmother is not on board with, as most grandparents are, they're not on board with super raunchy material, but but you still want to do something with your grandparents. And so you could be like, hey, come check this out, and, and watch this. And so, yeah, it's nice.
But also, one of the most amazing things, really, like on top of all of this, is that you could go to this area where you're relatable to like this like wide range of ages, but then you could also go to like this dark place where it's like you're talking about like the horse stroke, for instance, like what you did on Fallon.
Yeah.
So you could really just dig into all these areas, and it's like timeless, which is really, it's incredible. So I mean, your brain, like, wow, what I would do to like dig into it and just kind of see how you operate.
Yeah, I don't know. It bounces. It never stops, and it can be exhausting at times. You feel like your brain just never, for how slow I talk and all that stuff. I don't move around a lot on stage. I mean, my brain goes a million miles a minute, and it does exhausting. But yeah, you just think of different angles and different ways to do it, and then see, and you got to just stick to you. That's, again, going back to writing to you. Like, don't try to write for anybody else. You try to write for you, or, you're trying to stay whoever you are. Like, that's what people like. I mean, that's what we like about anybody. Musicians, you like them. You like what they say about, you listen, you're buying into them. I don't care. You don't necessarily want to hear what they're saying about what they think of me. Like, I want to hear what you think, and that's what you get into. And so that's what, hopefully, I'm glad that it comes off of it.
Do you write while you're actually on stage? So like, you'll be performing something, and then you'll start thinking of something else, and you're like kind of formulating it in your head already.
Yeah, that's what a lot of it, I write the idea down, maybe my phone. If I come up with an idea, I'll put it down. And then I've kind of thought about it before. And when I get to stage, I can kind of tell if something's going to be good or not. And now when you do these long sets, you can kind of throw them in whenever you want to throw them in. And I try to kind of piece everything together. So I kind of build it, I try to, it's not like you're thinking of all these jokes. It's like you kind of think you get this new hour of material, and then you kind of start like just piecing stuff, working it fit. And you're trying to make it sound conversational. So I'm always trying to make it, everything can lead into every other thing. And I've always kind of done that. Even when I would do 5-minute sets, you try to make them all kind of be able to like intertwine and figure a way, how do I get into this topic from this topic and make it, sound like it's normal that I got into it. Sometimes you can't, but a lot of times you can find some way. And sometimes when trying to find that way, you can get, sometimes a whole new joke might come out in the fact that you're trying to bridge these two jokes together. So yeah, it's like, that's what I try to do the most.
Absolutely. Now, kind of shifting to the NBC show, when is that going to come about, and how did the whole thing like come into fruition?
It's done. The pilot we shot for ABC, it was, it's over. I mean, there's no show now. We shot a pilot, and, you know, I've sold a bunch of scripts. I've done some with Fallon as a producer. And then, when Fallon was a producer of it, and you would sell these scripts, and then you see if you get a pilot, and then they all got passed on. No one ever did them. And then we shot a pilot for ABC, and then we did the whole day. It was a whole pilot, casting, all of it, but it didn't make the cut. So it just went away, and so now I'm just on to the next, you know, trying to figure it out now, how to write the next show. I mean, that's a whole nother world to get into, and it takes a long time. The same way as comedy. So you gotta just keep doing it. I mean, you just get told no a million times. All right, for me, some people don't. Some people you get lucky and it works out, and then sometimes it doesn't. So. But you just kind of keep it, you get into that world of selling scripts, and you know, hopefully you get pilot made, and then you get to see what happens, to see if they like it or not. And if they go, I mean, if that ABC show, it'd have probably been on the air right now if it would have went. But it didn't go, but it was an amazing experience, and learning that's such a different thing than stand-up comedy. So it was fun to get to learn it, you know.
So do you, like, your vision with regards to actually making a TV show, are you looking to actually tell your story? Is that what you're trying to sell right now?
I've done that mostly in the past. And now I'm not positive yet. I mean, we're still so like, I'm honestly like talking to some writers now to try to write something with. So I don't know. I think if I did it again, I wouldn't be a comedian. I would be just a guy. I would be more of a family show, like a married, you have a kid, like that kind of aspect to it, and no aspect of being comedy, but trying to just be like more of my act versus me being the comedian. More just like, here's marriage stuff, here's what it's like having a family, and that kind of comedy. So that's what I think I'll do next, if I try to write something. But you know, I'll see. Look, you get paired up with these writers that know how to write TV shows, and that's what's really good.
Absolutely. And to kind of end this thing off, what's the best conspiracy theory you've heard about coronavirus?
Oh man, my favorite was I don't know if it's a conspiracy about coronavirus, but when it first happened, I would have friends like, they'd be like, this was when like toilet paper was going off the shelves, and I would get friends being like, hey, my buddy just sent this text, they're about to shut down the whole country. You know, he was in a meeting with the president. And then I'm like, how? Like, and my buddy would believe it. And I'm like, dude, I don't believe that you have a buddy that was in a meeting with the president. There's no way. And so it's just always getting those like stupid texts of just someone like, they just said they're going to start killing everybody. And you're like, what? You're like, where are you hearing this? And they would always be like, no, I got a guy, he's high up somewhere, you know. And it was just always like, it was my most loser friends that had these weird connections that I just never believed.
Yeah, like we had the same thing in South Africa where we're getting voice notes, and it's like, this minister told my family whose teacher teaches the minister's kid, and then they went back to our business school, and like I don't know, it was about like 15 connections away. So it's just that didn't make
and you're like, I'm having a little trouble buying this. But everybody had that connection. Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
Now.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Well, anyways, Nate, I really appreciate the time you took to
Absolutely, dude.
Everyone, watch Nateland. It is amazing. It's available on all podcast platforms. Do you have anything else you want to promote?
No, that's all I'm got going on right now. So,
and then look out for Nate at MSG. Should we give it
at MSG? I mean, you know, I don't know. I mean, what do you 5 years? Is that enough time?
I think less.
All right. Well, I'll be back on in 5 years. If I'm not on in 5 years,
2021.
coming
Oh,
back.
God. Staples Center,
Yeah.
PSG. What would you call your arena tour, by the way?
Oh, I don't know. Right now, it's called the Good Problem to Have tour. I don't know. I'd have to be in the moment to see where I'm at that point.
Oh, I mean, we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time, man. I really
Call the
appreciate
Comedy Mouth tour. It'll be you called it.
it.
I'll call the You Called It tour.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Awesome.